This Christmas of 2025 marks a turning point for the global economy. As families gather to celebrate, few realize that the world outside their windows is shifting in ways that will shape the future for decades to come. 7 major exporting nations, led by Canada, joined by Germany, Japan, Brazil, India, Vietnam, and South Africa, have announced a coordinated reduction in exports to the United States. This unprecedented alliance signals a new level of cooperation among countries that have long been pillars of global trade. This isn't a temporary dispute, it's a calculated move to end the era of America as the world's default consumer. The decision is strategic, not reactionary, and it's designed to reshape the very foundations of international commerce. For decades, the global economy relied on the US as its engine of demand. Now, that engine is being throttled back, and the consequences are rippling across continents, affecting businesses, workers, and consumers everywhere. These are not adversaries, but traditional partners seeking to diversify and build resilient, multi-directional trade networks. Their goal is to reduce vulnerability and create new opportunities for growth beyond the American market. The world is moving away from over-reliance on the American market, driven by concerns over policy unpredictability and a desire for economic sovereignty. Nations are rethinking their strategies, prioritizing stability and self-determination. The unipolar moment, where Washington stood at the center of global commerce, is over. The balance of power is shifting, and new centers of influence are emerging. We are witnessing the birth of a new, more complex global economic architecture. Trade routes are being redrawn, and alliances are being forged in unexpected places. The old hub-and-spoke model, with the US at the center, is giving way to a web of interconnected regional blocks. These networks promise greater resilience and adaptability in a rapidly changing world. As goods and capital are redirected, so too is global influence. Economic power is becoming more distributed, and new voices are shaping the rules of the game. The implications are enormous, affecting everything from prices on American shelves to strategic decisions in capitals worldwide. Every household, every business, and every government will feel the impact in some way. For Americans, the immediate effects may be confusing. Some goods will become pricier or scarce. The familiar abundance of products may give way to uncertainty and adaptation. But the long-term shift is even more profound. American economic exceptionalism is being challenged. The nation must grapple with a new reality where its dominance is no longer assured. The US must now reconsider its role in a world that no longer revolves around it. Policymakers face tough choices as they navigate this unfamiliar landscape. The era of being the indispensable market has ended. The world is moving forward, and America must adapt or risk being left behind. A new era of competition and negotiation has begun. Every nation is now vying for its place in this evolving order, forging new partnerships and redefining old ones. This is the story of the great uncoupling and the new order it is creating. A world where power, prosperity, and influence are up for grabs, and the future is being written in real time. The actions of these 7 nations are not an act of aggression or a trade war. Rather than escalating tensions, they are choosing a different path, one that emphasizes diplomacy and long-term vision over confrontation. Instead, it's a quiet, strategic pivot, a realignment years in the making, shaped by careful planning and subtle shifts in alliances. These countries are insulating themselves from the volatility of American policy, not lashing out in anger. They're building buffers, preparing for uncertainty, and seeking to chart their own course. The power of this move lies in its coordination, a diverse group acting together to reshape the global system, united by a shared vision for the future. Their message is clear: the old model of dependence on the US is no longer sustainable, and a new era is beginning. They're choosing stability over dependency, even if it means short-term disruption or difficult adjustments for their industries. The global financial crisis, trade wars, and pandemic shocks expose the risks of a US-centric system, highlighting the need for change. Now, these nations are de-risking, seeking new customers, building new partnerships, and investing in alternative markets to diversify their economic futures. This alliance is about opening new doors, not closing old ones. It's about expanding opportunity, not retreating from the world stage. The goal: a world where a downturn in one economy doesn't trigger global collapse, but instead is absorbed by a stronger, more connected network. They're moving from dependence to interdependence, betting on a more distributed, resilient network of trade that can weather future storms. This is the new logic of global trade in 2025, a world where collaboration and adaptability define success. The world is now fundamentally multipolar. Power and influence are distributed among several major players and regional blocs, each shaping the global order in their own way. No single nation dominates the stage. Instead, influence is shared and constantly negotiated. The US remains powerful, but it's now one pole among many, adapting to a landscape where its decisions are balanced by the ambitions of others. The European Union, China, India, and Brazil are all carving out their own spheres of influence, asserting their interests on the world stage and building new partnerships that reflect their growing confidence. The old hierarchical structure is gone, replaced by a complex web of alliances and interests. Nations now form shifting coalitions, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing as they pursue their own goals. Trade patterns are shifting. South-South trade is booming, with Brazil exporting to Southeast Asia, and new economic corridors emerging between developing nations. Indian tech firms are serving Africa, bringing innovation and digital infrastructure to new markets, and forging connections that bypass traditional Western routes. New trade routes are replacing colonial-era patterns, driven by modern economic logic and the need for resilience in a rapidly changing world. Diplomacy is changing too. Global institutions are now forums for contentious debate, not US-led consensus. Every nation has a voice, and negotiations are more dynamic and unpredictable. Nations rich in critical minerals are banding together for leverage, using their resources as bargaining chips in the global marketplace. The G7's influence is challenged by broader groupings like the G20, where emerging economies demand a greater say in shaping global rules. For companies, success now demands agility and local knowledge. Now, understanding regional cultures, regulations, and consumer needs is more important than ever. Supply chains must serve multiple regional hubs, not just the US, requiring flexibility and the ability to adapt quickly to shifting conditions. Political risk analysis is more complex than ever, as companies must monitor a wider range of threats and opportunities across the globe. Navigating this multipolar world requires a new mindset and a competitive edge. One that embraces uncertainty, values diversity, and is ready to seize opportunities wherever they arise. The decline of the US-centric model has sparked a race to build new trade routes and economic corridors. China's Belt and Road Initiative was just the beginning. Now Germany, Brazil, and others are launching their own projects. These efforts are about more than infrastructure. They're about forging new spheres of influence and locking in economic relationships. Germany is investing in Central Asia, creating overland routes to Asia, and reducing dependence on Russia and China. Brazil is expanding in Africa, building partnerships and infrastructure, and creating a new axis of South-South cooperation. These alliances are transforming global supply chains, making them more resilient and regional. The world is moving from fragile, long supply chains to robust regional networks. This is the physical manifestation of the new multipolar order. For decades, the US dollar was the world's financial anchor, but in 2025, its dominance is eroding as nations seek alternatives. Countries are wary of the dollar's use in sanctions and want to reduce their exposure. China, Russia, India, and others are trading in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar. The shift is gradual, but the trend is clear. The dollar's share of global reserves is declining. Digital currencies and new payment systems are making it easier to transact outside the US-controlled system. A multi-currency world reduces transaction costs and insulates countries from US monetary policy, but it also brings complexity and volatility. Currency risk is now a bigger challenge. The era of easy dollar dominance is ending. Nations and companies must become more sophisticated in managing their finances. The global financial system is entering a new, more competitive phase. The pivot away from the US market requires massive investment in infrastructure. Nations are building ports, railways, airports, and digital networks to support new trade relationships. Vietnam, for example, is transforming itself into a logistics hub for intra-Asian trade, not just a supplier to America. Technology, AI, blockchain, advanced logistics is making these complex supply chains possible and secure. As new infrastructure is built, trade becomes cheaper and faster, fueling further investment. This creates a virtuous cycle, strengthening regional trade blocs and weakening the old US-centric model. The world is being physically and digitally rewired for multipolar commerce. Canada has emerged as a surprising leader in the new global trade order. Once defined by its relationship with the US, Canada is now more assertive and strategic. Its control over critical minerals gives it leverage in the green and digital economy. Ottawa is demanding investment in domestic industries in exchange for access to its resources. Canada is deepening ties with the US in high-tech sectors, while aggressively diversifying trade with Europe and Asia. It's using its leverage to push for higher environmental and labor standards. Canada is now a key middle power, bridging divides between major economies. The quiet follower has become a strategic player. Canada's rise is a symbol of the new multipolar world. Asia's pivot isn't just about new markets, it's about moving up the value chain. Countries like India and Vietnam are no longer just low-cost factories, they're designing, branding, and exporting high-value goods. India is attracting investment in electronics, pharmaceuticals, and defense, and is now innovating, not just assembling. Vietnam is shifting from garments to electronics and machinery, with regional trade outpacing exports to the US. Even China is focusing on AI, biotech, and renewables, ceding low-end manufacturing to others. This shift makes Asian economies less vulnerable to Western market pressures. Growth is now driven by domestic and regional demand for sophisticated products. These nations are becoming direct competitors with established industrial powers. The old division, West innovates, East produces, is breaking down. Innovation can now come from anywhere. The new global order presents a choice. Will multipolarity lead to conflict or cooperation? The risks are real. Economic friction, regional rivalries, and protectionism could rise. But the opportunities are just as great. A more distributed system could be more resilient and equitable. New economic centers mean growth can be more widely shared. Competition in infrastructure and technology could spur global innovation. Success will require agility, investment in education and technology, and diverse partnerships. Companies must build resilient, adaptable supply chains and embrace regionalization. The era of simple, globalized strategies is over. Mastering complexity is key. The great uncoupling of 2025 is not an end but a beginning. Navigating this new age will be the great challenge and opportunity of our time.